So we are an emerging and maturing ecosystem. And I think it's really critical to keep that in mind. We are at a moment in time where your effort matters. It builds institutions. And that's what we're doing. We collaborate now, the ESOP and worker co-op and employee-owned trust and broad-based ownership and equity compensation. We collaborate now on advocacy. And we're starting to collaborate on implementation, which is, I think, the game changer. It's easier, I think, to collaborate on advocacy than it is on implementation, but that's where the real work happens. And I think Joseph is right that the sort of general population support for the concept of employee ownership outpaces the bureaucrats and institutions who are sort of implementing it. And so, and I think that's a good problem to have in a lot of ways, right? That means we push. My second thought is that there are synergies happening to this idea that we are in a moment. If this legislation passes, gets implemented, gets funded, if the Work Act, results in this growth in state centers, that's certainly going to create a pipeline of borrowers for SBA loan programs. It will resonate into USDA. It'll resonate into other agencies. We're already seeing some of that happen. So there are synergies in policy, and particularly in the implementation, that are the sum is going to be greater than the whole of the parts. Or is that the way we say it? Yeah. So I think sort of keep that in mind when you're pushing too. And then the last thing, I think policy is a door, right? It opens a door. We all have a role in making sure that things don't get lost in translation from intention to implementation. We've heard about the role of the agency staff. We've heard a little bit about the role of the field. I think those hinge points are where are potential gaps, but they're also where connecting and perfecting policy happens. So what I mean by that, I mean the hinge point between legislation and implementation. I mean between federal and district office. I mean between the public sector and the nonprofit sector and the private sector. I mean the hinges agency to agency. So I think, if we want to keep the door open, we got to keep the hinges oiled. So what I would encourage you to think about, all of us, and research has a role to play here too, is what are you doing to oil those hinges, to identify where they are and to keep them oiled so that the doors can swing open.